At the time, the Imperial Japanese Navy was widely regarded as the most capable carrier force in the world. Its successes in the opening months of the Pacific War had gone largely unchallenged. What remained was an American carrier force that had not yet been tested in this way. Intelligence existed, but it aged quickly. Fleets maneuvered. Courses changed, and with every hour, the gap widened between what was known and what was still true. Earlier that morning, enemy carriers had been reported, but a sighting did not fix their position. By the time carrier-based pilots were airborne, the ocean ahead was once again empty. The Japanese plan was designed to end the carrier war in the Pacific. American carriers were expected to respond to Midway and be drawn into range. Once located, they were to be destroyed in a single engagement. What the Japanese did not know was that American commanders were already ahead of the plan. U.S. intelligence had identified Midway as the target. American carriers were positioned in advance, waiting, not to defend the island, but to intercept the fleet. It was the morning of June 4th, 1942. Just after dawn, Japanese aircraft struck Midway Atoll. The attack inflicted damage, but failed to neutralize the island's air power. Key targets, fuel storage and repair facilities, remained intact. A second strike was required to complete the mission. While Japanese aircraft refueled and rearmed, the U.S. Navy was already at sea. 3 carriers operated in 2 task groups. USS Enterprise and USS Hornet formed one force. USS Yorktown operated separately. Each group launched its own aircraft. Torpedo squadrons flying TBD Devastators went out first. They attacked at low altitude and inflicted little damage on the Japanese carriers. But the torpedo attacks had an unintended effect. Japanese Zero fighters were drawn down toward the surface. They stayed low, focused on the immediate threat. Above them, the airspace over the fleet briefly opened. The dauntless dive bomber pilots flew to the last reported position of the Japanese fleet. When they arrived, no ships were found. The search area had been covered. Fuel was already limited. The formation faced a choice: turn back to the Enterprise or continue on with what fuel remained. Commander Clarence McCluskey chose to press on, changing course to where he believed the Japanese would be. From altitude, a single wake cut sharply across the ocean below. It belonged to the Japanese destroyer Arashi, moving at high speed to rejoin the fleet after breaking formation. McCluskey followed the line of its wake. Minutes later, the ocean below resolved into a broad formation. 4 Japanese carriers were maneuvering together, surrounded by escorts. At the center of the formation was a Kagi, the flagship. The search was over. The American dive bombers did not arrive as a single mass. Aircraft from different carriers appeared over the Japanese fleet, almost simultaneously, but acted independently. McCluskey led the first dauntless formations into the attack. His aircraft rolled over from altitude and began diving on the carrier formation. Dive brakes deployed. Airspeed increased rapidly. Below them, the carriers were in the middle of rearming and refueling operations. Aircraft crowded the flight decks and hangars. Fuel hoses were connected. Bombs and torpedoes were staged for the next strike. The first bomb struck the cargo. Multiple hits penetrated the flight deck and detonated inside the hangar spaces. Fuel ignited instantly. Armed aircraft exploded where they sat. Fires spread faster than damage control teams could respond. Within moments, cargo was engulfed in smoke and flames. Minutes later, Lieutenant Commander Dick Best led his section down on the Akagi. Armed with a 1,000-pound bomb beneath his Dauntless, Best aimed for the center of the flight deck. The bomb struck near the forward elevator, and penetrated into the hangar below. Fueled and armed aircraft detonated in confined spaces. Fire raced through critical compartments. What might have been survivable damage under other conditions became catastrophic. In minutes, 2 fleet carriers were effectively destroyed. As the Soryu maneuvered amid the burning fleet, another group of U.S. Navy dive bombers arrived overhead. They were flying from the Yorktown. Below them, the Japanese formation was already breaking apart. Smoke drifted across the sea. Anti-aircraft fire was scattered and uneven. Soryu's flight deck was crowded with aircraft, some refueling, others armed for launch. Yorktown's dauntless pilots rolled into their dives. Bombs struck the flight deck. Explosions tore through the hangar spaces. Aviation fuel ignited instantly. Within minutes, Soryu was burning uncontrollably. 3 Japanese carriers had now been fatally damaged, not by a single coordinated strike, but by separate groups arriving independently, each acting on the moment before them. What Japanese commanders expected to unfold over hours had occurred in minutes, but the battle was not yet over. 1 Japanese carrier remained operational, the Hiryu. From her decks, strike aircraft were launched. Their target was the American carrier they could locate first. They found the Yorktown. Dive bombers struck the ship, disabling power and halting flight operations. Smoke rose from the deck. To Japanese pilots, the carrier appeared finished. They reported her sunk. But damage control teams aboard Yorktown went to work immediately. Fires were contained. Power was restored. The ship was made operational once more. Later that day, a second Japanese strike arrived. This time, torpedoes struck her hull. The Yorktown lost propulsion and began to list heavily. Once again, Japanese air crews reported a carrier destroyed. In reality, they had struck the same ship twice, each time believing it was a different American carrier. The confusion reflected the speed of the battle. Yorktown would later be abandoned and eventually lost. By the end of the day on June 4th, 1942, the outcome of the battle was no longer in doubt. Japan had lost 4 of their carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. But the loss went far beyond ships. Hundreds of experienced aviators were gone. Flight deck crews, maintenance specialists, air group commanders. These were men Japan could not quickly replace. The carriers that had struck Pearl Harbor, that had ranged across the Pacific unchecked, were now burning wrecks. In a single day, the Imperial Japanese Navy lost the core of its offensive power. Its ability to conduct large-scale carrier operations was shattered. What remained of the fleet withdrew westward, back toward Japan. The initiative in the Pacific had changed hands.